ตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ In a few days' time it will be Visakha Puja, the full moon day in May, which marks the anniversary of the Buddha's birth, enlightenment and parinibbana. So it's a very auspicious time for those with faith in the Buddha and his teachings. If you look outside at the night sky, the moon is waxing, it's becoming brighter every night, which is always a very sort of symbolic of the radiance of the mind as the moon becomes brighter and clearer. It reminds us of the mind that is free from mental defilements, free from suffering, the way it should be. It's what we aspire to, following the path of the Buddha. We're aspiring to free our mind from suffering, just as he did. And Vesak or Visakha Puja is it's a special time where we remember the Buddha, both the historical Buddha and then you might say the internal Buddha, the qualities of the path that lead to the end of suffering, the Four Noble Truths, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Of course, we all know there are those Buddhists who are what we call Vesak Buddhists, who only go to the monastery once a year on Vesak, which you might say is better than nothing. Remembering the Buddha, listening to a talk, perhaps making some offerings. But then the rest of the year they call themselves a Buddhist, but they don't actually do much. That's one of the obstacles facing us with our lifestyle, where we're embroiled in work, family, social things, the affairs, what we call the affairs of the world. It's so easy to forget the Buddha, forget the path of practice, and get distracted by life. So really every day is Vesak, celebrating the enlightenment of the Buddha, the wisdom, compassion and peace of the Buddha. Not just one day, every day. The more that we practice, the more our mind inclines towards the teachings and realizing the Four Noble Truths, the more we're seeing the Buddha on the inside, in our heart, in our mind. As we know that one who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha, one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. The causes of suffering are still present in our heart, in our mind, and they're doing their thing, causing us stress and suffering potentially every moment of every day. So the opportunity to see the Dhamma, to let go of these causes of suffering that are fed by our greed, anger and delusion, it's always there. There's always an opportunity to practice what the Buddha taught. And a large part of our practice is repetition of doing good things, offering dana, undertaking to follow the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts or the 227 precepts if you're a monk. Regularly developing mindfulness, cultivating mindfulness in meditation and just in daily life. A large part of our practice is just repetition of these ways that the Buddha gave us for bringing our mind to understand what is suffering, what its nature is, and how to overcome it, how to end it. The briefest description of what the Buddha taught is that there is suffering and there's the end of suffering. And he was helping to illuminate our minds through his teachings and through his example, encouraging us to have enough confidence in what he taught to put it into practice for ourselves. So Wesak is a time to sort of re-establish your faith and your confidence in the Buddha and his path of practice. Because it's so easy for us in this world to get lost in what we might call wrong views and different kinds of beliefs and ways of looking at the world that are not coming from a place of wisdom and compassion, as the Buddhist teachings are, but are coming from a place of attachment, greed, anger. And when we follow the defilements in whatever way we do, then we're not coming from the place where the Buddha was encouraging us to, coming from the place of ignorance. And you see that in your own life, I do in my life, I'm sure you do in yours all the time, where we completely forget the Dhamma, forget the path of practice. So Wesak is a time to come back to re-establish faith in the Buddha's teaching, particularly in the most fundamental teaching of cause and effect, cause and result, the teaching on karma. That our suffering comes through our own, the causes which come through our own behavior, of body, speech and mind. And the end of suffering also comes through our own behavior of body, speech and mind. Because the tendency is, when we are fuzzy or unclear in our faith and in our path of practice, well, we'll tend to look for more external sources of inspiration and support. So we all know that feeling when we pray to some other being, whether it's the Buddha or the God or gods, devas, deities. We'll tend to ask for help when we're suffering and struggling and frustrating. Ask for all the good forces in the universe, whoever they may be, wherever they may be, whether it's a single God or many gods, or particular God, some deity that we feel attracted to. So often we'll be praying to them when we first have suffering. That's our first response, rather than coming back to look at our own actions and the effects of our own actions on our mind, our heart, and our experience of life. But the teachings of the Buddha are, I would say, they're the most mature, wisest teachings that the world knows, because the Buddha is putting it back on us and saying, these deities and gods and external forces can't free you from suffering ultimately. And they may even, by putting all your belief in external forces and deities, you may even be giving up your own ability to understand suffering and its cause and free yourself from suffering. Whether it's going to the astrologer and putting all your faith in the astrologer, or some shrine, some god. And this isn't to denigrate or criticize gods and who they are and what they are, or astrologers or anyone. But it's a simple truth. If you put all your faith in these external things, then you're no longer, at that point, you're no longer looking at your own heart and cause and effect in your own heart, your own thoughts, your intentions, your speech, your actions. You forget that, don't you? If you go to the astrologer and want to find out what's going to happen to you this year, and is it going to be good and bad? You're no longer looking at cause and effect. You're just listening to the words of another person, and they may be skilled, but they may not be. They may wish you well, or they may not. They may have integrity, or they may not. Or if you're praying to some deity, they may have all kinds of special powers and be a luminous deity up in the heaven realms. It may be true, maybe not. But one thing the Buddha pointed out is that any being in any realm of existence is still subject to birth, aging, sickness and death. Even deities and gods get reborn. And they're not always reborn in good places either. Sometimes they fall to unpleasant realms of existence. And they're not our true refuge. And yet we tend to go to them first, don't we? But the Buddha said our real refuge is putting faith in the law of karma, cause and effect, action and results, and seeing that its actions and results is where you can really learn and improve your life and find your real way out of suffering. If we're suffering in life, we're angry, we're sad, we're worried, afraid, we're full of greed and ambition that's kind of burning up our mind. There's a cause for that. And the cause is our own delusion, our own lack of understanding, and we're getting lost in those views and those ways of action, those thoughts. That's where we have to look. That's where the Buddha was always encouraging us to look, to understand. Coming back to the present moment, establishing mindfulness and knowing our own mind and what's going on there, what's arising, what are we thinking, what are we feeling, what's our view, what's our attitude at this very moment. That's where suffering comes from. It's not arising out there in any external place. And there's little that external beings can really do other than sort of soothe us and make us feel better. The real place of practice has to be a very mature response to our own suffering and understanding and accepting it and taking responsibility for it, acknowledging it. If I'm angry, the causes lie within me. What I've said, what I've done. If I'm sad, the causes lie within me. If I'm burning with some kind of desire or attachment, the cause of that lies within me. It's not out there. It's not to be solved out there by putting my faith in external things. The modern deities are maybe the stock market, financial markets, assets, buying a second home, saving money. They tend to be the modern deities, don't they? That we worship and put all our trust in. As long as I get that bit of money, then I'll be able to pay off that debt, and then I'll be all right and solve all my problems, and life will go well. When everything is just right out there, then things will be right in here, inside our mind. But it doesn't really work that way, does it? So Wesak is a time to come back and examine your own faith. What do you really have faith in life? Where do you put your faith? And that means what you put your value in, what you give value to. And the more we draw close to the Buddha and his teachings, we're putting value on the teaching of cause and effect, karma, and then putting it into practice. Even teaching on karma is not in itself is just a theory, isn't it? It's just a teaching, it's just words. We have to take it and practice with it, put it into practice. That's why the Buddha pointed out that the most powerful kind of good karma is the practice of bhavana, meditation, cultivating mindfulness, energy, and investigating the truth. So that's where we can really change the experience of life for the better, improve ourselves, and abandon the causes of suffering. But because it's the highest form of good karma, the most, the best kind of karma a human being can do, it's the one that we do least, because we feel it's too hard, too difficult. We have the most excuses when it comes to the practice of bhavana. Most of us can agree that practicing generosity and kindness in daily life is a good thing. It's still hard, but it's a good thing, and we're willing to give it a go in different ways. Usually with our family and friends, but occasionally we go a bit beyond that and help others in society. But when it comes to bhavana, we have all the excuses ready. We're not yet willing to commit to training ourselves in mindfulness and investigation of the Dhamma. But what will help there is faith. What brings you faith will bring you to practice and develop bhavana, listening to the Dhamma, studying and listening to the Dhamma, respecting the Dhamma. If you're really going to use the Dhamma in your life to help improve your life and experience more peace and happiness, then you have to give it respect, value. I remember one of the first things I learned in the monastery in Thailand was to respect the Dhamma. So if you have a Dhamma book, you never put things on it. You don't use it to hold your coffee cup or other items. If you have a Dhamma book, you tend to put it in a safe place and you respect even the book. Now, it's not a superstitious faith in a book. It's simply acknowledgement that that book, if it contains Dhamma, so teachings of the Buddha, it's of value. So you're training your mind to value the Dhamma. And the same with listening to Dhamma. I can remember the very first time I was at Wat Pananachat, when I was about 20 years old. I went there. I was amazed how the locals came into the monastery and they sat so serenely and mindfully and in such a composed way to listen to a Dhamma talk. There wasn't a sound. They didn't move around. They didn't talk. They listened. Some of them even listened with their hands in Anjali for maybe half an hour or an hour to a Dhamma talk. They had so much respect. You could see how that pervaded their lives. Even when they walked into the monastery in the old days, this is like 40 years ago, they walked into the monastery, a lot of them took their shoes off at the gate and walked in barefoot, holding their shoes out of respect for the Dhamma and the place, the monastery as a place of worship, place of practice. And they would spend time cleaning up any kind of rubbish in the monastery, leaves and litter. They would clean it up, keep the buildings clean as part of their practice, out of respect for the Dhamma. And then they would come in, when they came into the hall, they would meditate or chant or listen to Dhamma, so mindful and restrained. None of them were arahants, of course. They still had all their attachments and problems in their life, their suffering. But they had this advantage of having strong faith in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, which translated into very skillful behaviour. Me personally, I came from London, South London, young, unrestrained, not very mindful, not much faith. Some faith, but not yet strong faith, and I hadn't yet learned how to respect the Dhamma. So for me this was very inspiring, and I could see people who had so much faith in the Dhamma, so much respect, that they would sit meditation and listening to Dhamma talks all night long. Maybe get up once or twice to go to the toilet or stretch their legs, but people were willing to sit for hours and hours and hours, meditating, listening to talks, chanting, out of respect for the Dhamma. So I remember asking the first day when I was there, why is it like this? Why do these people do this? Because I haven't seen it anywhere else in the world. And then one of the monks said they have faith. Saddha is the word. Faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dhamma, faith in the Sangha. And we had Ajahn Chah as the leader of the Sangha, so a living representative of the noble ones, which helps. As the Buddha said, associating with the wise, the noble ones, seeing them, making offerings to them, associating with them, brings up faith. If we don't have the Buddha anymore, we have his teachings, but we don't have the physical Buddha, but we have the noble ones, they're living examples of the teachings in practice. We don't have to guess what level of attainments they have, but just if they're embodying the teachings, they keep the discipline, they practice mindfulness, they explain the Dhamma, and they have a peaceful presence, that's good enough, isn't it? It sets an example that brings up faith. And if you reflect on this, say at this time of Wesak, really reflect on the role of faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha in your life, and how to preserve faith and increase your faith. You'll see this is an essential part of progress in the practice. If your faith is still very weak or disappears from time to time, you'll find it hard to commit to the practice, to make the effort to train your mind, to meditate, to even just to make offerings or keep precepts, because you'll be full of doubt, and the doubt makes your mind shaky, uncertain. The opposite of faith is a lack of confidence or doubt, skepticism, uncertainty. And when the mind is uncertain, it's easily shaken. So if your faith is weak, you may, from time to time have the thought to do something good, like make an offering of dana or keep precepts or meditate, but something else comes along, it will shake you, to stop you or put you in another direction, send you in another direction. So you might think, why make these offerings? It's my hard-earned cash. I should just spend it on myself, enjoy my own wealth. Or keeping precepts, why should I be restrained when other people treat me so badly? I should be sticking up for myself, or fighting others, responding to others. When they push me, I'll push them, so to speak. Or enjoying myself, who needs to be restrained? I'll just have as many girlfriends or boyfriends as I like, and get drunk as I like. Of course, this is your right, your choice. But if you look more deeply, what's happening is your mind has lost faith in the good path, lost clarity, so it's going in a way that's actually leading towards more suffering. Same with meditation. When your faith is shaky or weak, it's hard to commit to sitting down for a period of time to train your mind in mindfulness, isn't it? You don't have that energy, because from faith you get energy. Faith brightens the mind, energizes the mind, so that you can sit and work with whatever is coming up in your mind. All the stressful feelings and thoughts, the worries, the lack of peace, the distraction, the sleepiness. You need faith to be able to work with that in the beginning. Obviously, over time, you need to translate that into mindfulness and wisdom as well, but in the beginning we just need some faith, some confidence that it's worthwhile. So Wesak is a time to at least once a year come back and re-establish faith in the path of practice. Respect for the Buddha, respect for the Dhamma. As we know from the Mangala Sutta, this very beginning of the Buddha's teachings on what are blessings in life, the blessing of having people worthy of honor and honoring them. Puja cha puja niyanang etamang kalamutamang. You're honoring the worthy. That's Sangha, monks, nuns, even laymen, lay women who practice the Dhamma, the Buddha, his teachings, the Sangha. Honoring those who are worthy of honor. That brings up faith. When you have people who are good examples, that you seek them out, you remind yourselves who they are, you spend time with them, you support them. It's another reason we offer dana, is to bring ourselves closer to the Sangha. But honouring the worthy, these are internal qualities as well, not just externally going to a temple or a monastery and meeting Sangha, but internally, does your mind really honor the worthy? Does it really look up to the noble ones, the Sangha, people who have precepts and virtue? Does it really aspire to follow in their example or not? If you have true faith, there'll be that wish to do the same, to emulate your teachers and your guides, to honor the worthy through the practice. So preserving strong faith is essential in the practice. Of course, it has to be supported by wisdom and insight and knowledge, so that your faith isn't shaky or put in the wrong place. Sometimes, as I said, we can get lost and put our faith in that which is not so worthy, or which will not lead us to enlightenment. So we have to test our faith, reflect on it, remind ourselves what our faith is, observe ourselves and check ourselves from time to time. Do we still have faith in the Buddha and the path of practice, the noble path? But as we bring up faith, then we get this energy, this brightness of mind, and energy to really try. Like those villages I first encountered when I went to northeast Thailand, they could really try in their practice. They could sit all night listening to Dhamma, meditating, because they have faith. And they do that week in, week out, even though they had jobs, they were very poor and they had to work. They would keep coming back to the monastery, listening to the Dhamma, practicing in whatever way they could. And some of them got good results, because if you're really willing with faith to put effort into practicing mindfulness with an object, such as reciting the meditation word Buddho, or focusing on the breath, then from time to time your mind will enter states of samadhi, states of calm will come up through those efforts. Based on that faith, based on that effort, you'll experience moments and times and periods of time where the hindrances subside and the mind becomes clear and lucid. And some of those villages, I remember telling me, they did have those periods when the mind became very lucid. Rapture, joy would arise, all the pain and tiredness of the body would disappear, and the mind would become very still, bright, like the moon on Wesak. The hindrances would be gone for a period of time, and they could really see the truth. And very simple truths that anyone can really understand intellectually, that all conditions that are subject to arising are subject to cessation. When I say conditions, I mean physical and mental conditions. This body, the feelings of this body, the sensations, and then the mind, the memories, the thoughts, the feelings of the mind, the emotions. When your mind is clear and lucid, you can really see that everything arises and passes away. This morning there was a man standing by our Bodhi tree, which grows by the side of this hall I'm sitting in, and it's kind of bucking the trend. It's growing quite well, even though we're in the mountains and we're now entering winter. It's quite cold. Our Bodhi tree is growing quite well. It surprises many people. Hopefully it will last a bit. But he was standing by and he said, I've been coming to this monastery for about 15 years. And he was standing with his son, who's got a beard. Because I remember when he was much younger and didn't have a beard, when he was just a kid. I said, yeah, I know, you've been coming, the whole family have been coming here for many years. And he said, there was one teaching that I gave when he first came, so many, many years ago. This very simple teaching that, everything is impermanent. Whatever you think is impermanent. It arises, passes away. Whatever you feel arises, passes away. Whatever you build or create in this world, the material world, arises and passes away. And he's been using that teaching ever since, and he says it saved him so much suffering, because every time he falls into a state of suffering, he can bring up that reflection and know it will pass, it will change. Anger, worry, fear, distraction, being fed up, depressed, sad, whatever. You know that feeling will pass because you've seen it pass before, and you're seeing it pass right now, and it will these feelings and emotions will arise and pass away again in the future, no doubt. But that's their nature. And this is the Buddha arising in the mind, the quality of the Buddha, seeing the Dhamma, seeing the impermanent nature of our own moods and mental states, is seeing the Buddha. When we're suffering, it's because we forget the Buddha, forget the Dhamma, and we believe that thought, that mood, that problem that we've created in our mind. We believe it and we get stuck in it. So we suffer. And this is why we need to keep coming back to practicing mindfulness. Because it's like dragging the mind back away from ignorance, delusion, craving, suffering, back to the Buddha. Literally, it's like, a mental act of pulling your mind back to the present moment, bringing up the reflection, this too is impermanent, this arises and passes away, and freeing your mind from suffering at that time. Another person today was asking, how do we deal with the grief when our loved one passes away? Someone you've lived with for decades, that you've loved and shared your time with, and then they die on you, they pass away. Well, it's the same reflection, isn't it? All of us must die. It's the most natural, normal thing in life. It's that life comes to an end. It's the nature of human life. Human existence is temporary. In Wesak, we're reflecting on that, the fact that the Buddha, special as he was, extraordinary as he was, with the unlimited compassion and wisdom of a Buddha, he still was a human being, subject to birth, aging, sickness and death. In his death we call parinibbana, but the simple term is death. A Buddha dies. He doesn't live forever, he's not a god, he's not some special being. He's a human being who penetrated the Four Noble Truths through his practice, and out of compassion taught them to the people of the world. But he also died. So the Buddha has to die, we have to die. That's the nature of existence, and we have to bring our minds to contemplate this. Get used to the fact that this body ages, gets sick, and one day will die. To free our mind from this kind of endless grief, the loss, the suffering of loss, separation from those we love and like. And we can do that. We can do that right now, bringing up this reflection over and over again through our life, bringing our mind to the Dhamma every day. This is where freedom from suffering comes from. Seeing the Buddha, seeing the Dhamma every day in our existence as human beings, freeing our mind from the grief of separation, of aging, of different kinds of painful experiences, seeing them as temporary, seeing it, that is the way the world works, that is the way our life works. The only way to see this is investigate. The Buddha gave us this path we call the path to enlightenment, and literally it's cultivating the factors of enlightenment. Those 7 factors of enlightenment: mindfulness, investigation of Dhamma, persistence, tranquility, rapture, tranquility, samadhi, stillness, and then Opaquer. The hardest of all, of the 7th factor of enlightenment. Opaquer meaning bringing your mind to know and see the way things are. without being shaken, without suffering. So bringing the mind even to accept the inevitability of the death of our loved ones, the separation from everything we love and like, the ending of things that we like, so accepting with equanimity that pleasure arises and passes away just as pain does. Accepting the temporary nature of phenomena, mental states. This is the highest in Buddhism, equanimity, Opaquer. But it's doable, it's possible. This is what frees the human mind from suffering, bringing the mind to a full awareness, unshakable. And it comes from that beginning point of faith in the Buddha, being willing to put effort into the practice, cultivating the path, experiencing the peace, the tranquility, but continuing to put effort into the practice, to the point where the mind becomes calm and able to accept some of the difficult truths that we all have to accept. Of course, nobody wants to face the death of a loved one or the loss of some pleasant experience, but it happens, because that's the way it is. That's the way life is. If you can see that and know that, then you're seeing and knowing the Buddha. There's this comment Ajahn Chah made. Some people used to ask Ajahn Chah why he didn't go to India, because already, even in his lifetime, people started making the pilgrimages to India, to the Bodhi tree where the Buddha was enlightened. And it's a great thing if you can do it. It's harder now in these times of COVID, but many people have done those pilgrimages. I've done them. It's a very inspiring thing to do. But Ajahn Chah didn't go. And he said, the Buddha can't arise in Thailand then, can it? Can't the Buddha arise in Thailand? Can't the enlightened mind arise in Thailand? Obviously, Luang Por was in Thailand at the moment he said that. That was where he lived and practiced. Enlightenment is not fixed to time, place, location. It comes about through causes, skillful causes, bringing the correct results. So if somebody cultivates this path, the Eightfold Noble Path, persistently, unwaveringly, then the result will come. The mind will be free from suffering. It's as simple as that. There's no one else involved, there's no higher authority controlling it. It's not to do with the stars, the astrology, the gods. It really is just as simple as cause and result. If you cultivate this path, then it will free your mind from suffering. The experience of enlightenment can arise wherever you are listening to this talk, in whichever part of the world. If you apply this Eightfold Noble Path, put your heart into it with faith, with effort, keep going, then the result will come. We call it Magga Phala Nibbana, path, fruit, Nibbana. It has its causes. If those causes are cultivated, developed, then the fruits will come. Faith alone is not enough, but faith is the starting point. That's where you get your oomph, your energy to begin practicing, to give up some of the other things that you're so attached to and cling to, but cause you so much pain. Those comforts and pleasures and vices and things that you're not yet willing to give up. They're actually that's probably the place you need to start practicing first, isn't it? You give up some of those little pleasures. We sometimes call them evil pleasures, things that are holding us back in our life. We would rather watch the latest episode of the TV show rather than meditate. We'd rather sleep. We'd rather follow the path of distraction. We'd rather get angry and seek revenge and complain about people rather than forgive and let go. We'd rather get lost in our fantasies and our imagination rather than establish mindfulness and clarity. On and on it goes. This is where we have to bring the faith and really try. When you notice where you're going wrong in your life, what you need to give up, what you need to change, that's what you have to make a decision on. And faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha will help you. You use that faith to bring up regular effort and regular practice, and then results start to come. As Ajahn Chah said, little by little, if you keep establishing mindfulness, every moment of mindfulness is like a drop of water. Little by little, your water jar will become full. Doesn't matter how long it will take, how slow, how fast. Establishing mindfulness, giving up whatever it is you need to give up, it will happen. Your water jar will gradually become full. But you have to have the faith to keep going. Listening to the Dhamma and then applying it, and then little by little that water jar will keep filling until one day it will be full. Ajahn Chah would say that the mind that is free from suffering feels full. Just in the same way, when you eat a lot of food, you feel full. You're no longer hungry. The mind that's seen the Dhamma, that's practiced this path, cultivated the good qualities, becomes fuller and fuller. It no longer hungers for anything, no longer feels lacking in anything. Craving means hunger, desire. The end of craving, when you have enough mindfulness and you can see craving as the cause of suffering and you let it go, then the mind feels full, doesn't want anything else. It's at peace, it's at ease within itself. Whatever else is happening in the world, however crazy the world is, however chaotic the world is, things go your way, they don't go your way, doesn't matter. The mind is feeling full inside. It's at ease, it's peaceful. So, this is time for celebration. Wesak is a time to celebrate our good fortune. We still have the Buddhist teachings for us to practice. We can remember the Buddha, we can remember our parents and our teachers, honour them, remember the goodness of what they've done, and then set our own hearts on practicing, giving something back to them, and also for ourselves, and also for our future generations. Maybe some of you are parents as well. Parents have parents, and parents have children. And there's many generations here, so we're practicing for everyone, aren't we? For ourselves and for others. Maybe I'll leave the talk there and wish you all well in your practice at this time of Wesak, and I'll finish there.